Hello, dear colleagues. My name is Malena Damián. I'm a professor and researcher of the University of the Republic in Uruguay. Today, I will be presenting some advances of a research process initiated within the framework of the master program in physical education of the Higher Institute of Physical Education of the University of the Republic. And some of these advances are also part of research internship carried out last year in the frame of a cooperation agreement and an institutional link between the University of the Republic and the University of the Federal University of Paraná in Brazil. Last year, during the period of a month and a half, I worked directly with Dr. Marcelo Moraes Silva in the production of historiographical work. He is a co-leader of the research line that I integrate in the university along with my tutor, Dr. Evelise Angarden Kitsau, both of them important researchers in the topics of historiography and physical education in the region. But I also consider important to say before I begin the presentation that this is also part of a larger investigative process that's my master work, in which is also tutored by Dr. Pablo Ariel Shalandrowski, research on topics related to historiography, gender, sexualization, and education. So in order to begin with the presentation, I will be showing some slides about this larger project for you to understand what follows later. What I mean in this master work is to analyze with a gender perspective the epistemic and contextual conditions that have traditionally determined the field of physical education in Montevidean schools. And here the specific objectives that are to analyze these practices and discourses, how they were related, what was said, what was silenced, by whom and from whom, with the lens on gender, but mostly with the lens on the construction of sexual differences, and also to analyze the production of objections. This means to identify and analyze those practices and discourses that build senses around the notions of feminities, masculinities, and objections, identifying how the body differences were constructed as a result of historical process of social and cultural constructions, specifically in case of Montevideo Physical School. Here are some of the main questions. The time frame of the investigation is, as you could see, 1892 to 1911. Here in 1892, we have this moment in which the first program of physical exercises and gymnastics was approved to be used in schools in a temporary way up to 1897. That was the second one approved. But this date is also an important moment of dispute, not only in terms of discourses about the physical education and the school and the education in school, but also of this movement known as the woman emancipation, associated with the feminism of the moment. I identified that here we have simultaneous situations happening around these topics, and these are topics of specifically important for this investigation. 1911 is the time where the National Commission of Physical Education is created, and here, as an entity that was in charge of promotion, management, and programming the physical education inside the school, but also outside the school, here we can identify a clear change also in terms of discourses and practices occurring in Montevideo by the creation of this National Commission. Previous investigations, it's important to say here that we don't have previous investigations directly on the topics of my master program in Uruguay. We do have these works of Pablo Ariel Shalandrowski that stand out in the region directly, and mostly he works in Argentina. And we also have some other works of authors that indirectly work with the topic of my investigation, but not in a specific way regarding to the gender topics. Also, in the below you can see, below this slide you can see that there are other investigations that, due to the themes and perspectives of approach, provide an approximation to some questions that are interests for my investigation too, regarding to the topics of feminism, history of feminism in Uruguay, and the discussions about the education of women. Here you can see a theoretical field constructing this process of investigation that I thought it was important at least to say it. And the presentation of the sources. These are the main categories we made for the analysis of the sources. We have these handbooks and school textbooks, the official documents and the complementary sources, also the photography archive. But as it is an ongoing investigation, I'm right now working with these first three categories. These handbooks, they were meant to be used in the school, but also at home. And they were, I think, this is an important part of the investigation, because they show the ways in which the education of the body of the time was certainly being ongoing. Also, we have these other sources. I will be moving forward with the presentation to get here. That is what I was mostly intend to present today, is the way in which the body representations and the sexual difference is constructing the sources. I've been analyzing these categories of sources, asking myself about this construction of the sexual difference. And here I would say that we have three main ways in which you can see this in the sources. The first way is regards to this second session of the Latin American Scientific Congress. I've been analyzing the documents of this second session. Here I think it's important to say that this Congress was held in Montevideo from 20 to 31 of March of 1901. This was the second meeting of the Latin American Scientific Congress. But it's important to say that it's a part of a sequence of events that constitute the first International Scientific Association of Latin America in the late 19th and early 21st century. So we are talking about 5 meetings, and I analyzed specifically the second session that was held in Montevideo, the ways in which sexual differences it appears in the sources that regards to this Congress are mostly these two. The one is to appeal to a biological discourse, fundamentally through physiology. As you can see here, this slide shows 3 titles of papers presented at the Congress. The first was presented in the section of Medical Sciences and Dialogues on Physiology as the new biology. That's what it says, the new physiology as the new biology. And so here we have a change also in terms of discourses. And although I have not been able to access the full presentation after reading the source and reading some other works presented in the period, you can see that this biological argument is an important argument on the construction of the sexual differences, and the discussions around the role of women in school by the period. Specifically, there was a discussion that was about whether women could be part of the primary school for all grades and for both sexes. The rest of the papers present here also shown this type of arguments. The first one was presented in the section in the medical section, and we have 3 others presented in the pedagogical section of the Congress. They all discuss these biological matters about the sexual differences, but they do it in a way of justifying weakness. So here we have this theory of impregnation that Silvana reworks in her thesis about the pedagogical discourses that were circulating around the sexual education of the 20th century. And she talks about this theory of impregnation, as to say that this risk of as the woman as a weak sex, she could infect children that would be under her responsibility with her condition of woman. That's the theory Silvana develops on her work, and you can see in the discussions on of the Congress these kind of arguments to justify the to justify a negative point of view around women in school. We also have these texts that are, I shall speak two of the manuals I'm working with. They are both written by this Alejandro Lamas. He was an important person in the period that wrote the first manual, for example, of physical education and gymnastics to be used at schools. And he also wrote lots of handbooks of economy, domestic economy, but also some others of behaving, how to behave in school. So here I found this very representative of a way of thinking, and I selected these two quotes to show how these differences were also, gender differences were also in these sources, right? As you can say, as you can see in the last one, although they are not contemplated in the program, I believe female teachers could order them with confidence. He's talking about instructions of physical education that have not been contemplated in the program he made. And also here in this, the domestic economic handbook, they suppress about the condiments as another way of teaching about sex, about sexual matters, or about gender matters is the metaphors used. Here you have this prerogative of suppressing the sources and species that do nothing other than flattering the flavor in an excessive manner as a condemnable thing. Here some images of these textbooks I was talking about for you to see how the body represents differently from one's and another's. We have this naked man body and child body naked, and this woman with completely dressed as ways of seeing this in the sources to be developed later. And then the last thing I would like to say is these metaphors and meanings given to the physical education in gender and sexual order, that are three metaphors I identify in these sources that contribute to what I'm saying. One is the idea of the family. You could, in the analysis of the sources, you can see the idea of the family giving an important place to this construction of gender. We also have the metaphor of the woman motherhood. This is also important, I think, because as in the study of the sources, the mandate of motherhood and the mandate of masculinity quickly observing different discursive formations, like the pedagogical, the biomedical, the juridical, or the religious one. But also what is interesting here is to know that in the story of feminism in Uruguay and in the story of the process of emancipation of women, it is shown these emancipatory movements were also founded on the basis of these imperatives, on the basis of this idea of the motherhood, regarding to education, in attempt to argue for an education for the future mother, as a way of getting this possibility, right, of be considered a citizen. Here you can see it in this slide. Because if the man needs a vigorous body, the woman who engenders him, raises him, and educates him needs no less. But what is interesting, it was what I was saying, that also the feminisms of the moment take these ideas to justify the real education. And the last metaphor is the construction of masculinity associating man to vigor. I identify this prescribed moral universe and this proscribed moral universe associated, the first one with virility, force, and the second one with apathy or reservation and not to occupy spaces and behave energetically. Here we have how the masculinity was constructed in sources, but metaphors also use that regards to the nation forefront. So as it is an ongoing investigation, there are some other things I will be developing later around these activities and contents, specifically of physical education that were prescribed for the specific case of Montevideo. Also the activities, the moral universe, the ways of constructing the objections, and what I would like to say is these call these silences that were the first emerging in the work of the sources, mostly when talking about women's or when talking about this process. So I don't know if you can see here the biography. I'm watching it, but I don't know if it's some problem occur with my Zoom. So thank you very much for the possibility of the presentation, and hope we have a good evening.